no one remembers exactly what the sun looked like anymore. They say it was once a great sphere of fire hanging in the sky, that its light was so bright no human could stare directly into it, that fields once stretched green all the way to the horizon, that rivers reflected a blue sky, and that children could run outside without carrying a lantern. But those are only stories now, because 300 years have passed since the last sunrise, and to those who are alive today, daylight is nothing more than a legend. 300 years ago, the world was still much like the one humanity had always known. Day followed night. Winter gave way to spring. People grew wheat, raised livestock, built cities, and fought wars over lands that no one would want today. There was no prophecy warning of the end. No army appeared on the horizon. No star fell from the heavens. No divine trumpet sounded. The last day beneath the sun was perfectly ordinary. That afternoon, farmers returned from their fields. Soldiers closed the city gates. Merchants packed away their stalls. Children were called home as darkness approached. The sun slowly disappeared behind the western mountains. No one knew they were watching it for the last time. Night came, and the world went to sleep. The next morning, the roosters still crowed. Church bells still rang. People woke, lit their fires, and prepared for another day. But outside their windows, it was still dark. At first, no one was afraid. Perhaps it was only a storm. Dark clouds often covered the sky at the end of winter. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 3. The sky did not change. There was no dawn. Not a single ray of light appeared in the east. Only a vast blue-black darkness stretching from one horizon to the other. By midday, lamps were burning throughout the cities. Thousands of people gathered in the streets. Together, they stared east and waited. Some prayed, others laughed and said everything would return to normal tomorrow. But tomorrow came, and the sun did not rise. The third day was the same. Then the fourth, the fifth. By the seventh day, people stopped waiting. After 2 weeks, the temperature began to fall. After a month, the fields began to die. Young plants stopped growing. Livestock became restless. Birds fled south in enormous flocks, as though they knew of some distant place where the light still remained. None ever returned. Then winter came. Not the winter humanity had known before. This was a winter with no end. Rivers froze. Lakes froze. Snow buried the fields that had once fed millions. Food began to disappear. And when humanity finally understood that the sun might never return, prayers turned into screams. Kingdoms blamed one another. A king in the west declared that his enemies had used forbidden magic to hide the sun. A cult in the south claimed humanity had angered the gods. In the north, thousands climbed the highest mountains, believing the sun still existed somewhere above the clouds. None of them returned. Astronomers searched the heavens. Scholars tore through ancient books. Priests prayed day and night. No one found an answer. But there was something strange. The moon was still there. The stars were still there. Only the sun was gone. The first year became known as the year without dawn. Half the world's crops died. By the second year, trade routes began to disappear. Caravans carrying food required armed soldiers for protection. A sack of flour could buy a sword. A horse could buy a house. By the third year, money meant nothing. People began killing for food. Cities sealed their gates. Villages vanished. Forests became places no one dared to enter, not only because of the darkness, but because something within that darkness was changing. The first stories appeared during the winter of the fourth year. A company of 32 soldiers disappeared along the northern road. Their wagons were found. Their weapons were found. Their food was untouched. But there were no bodies. In the snow were the footprints of 32 men and another set of tracks, 3 times larger than those of a human. They had followed the soldiers from the forest. but there were no tracks showing that the creature had ever returned. Then came other stories. People heard their names whispered from outside their windows. The dead were seen standing among the trees. Creatures appeared that moved only when no fire was burning. And in the furthest reaches of the north, people began seeing enormous shapes moving between the mountains. The world had not simply lost the sun. The darkness seemed to have brought something with it. By the 9th year, most of the old kingdoms were gone. But just as humanity stood at the edge of extinction, the fires appeared. No one knew where they came from. The surviving records gave them only one name: the sacred fire. A flame that required no wood, no oil. It could not be extinguished by wind, and most importantly, the creatures of the darkness feared it. The surviving cities began constructing enormous towers. At the top of each tower, a fragment of the sacred fire was placed inside a great stone brazier. Its light spread across the city walls. And for the first time in almost a decade, humanity had somewhere to live without fearing the darkness. The last cities of mankind were born around those flames. 300 years passed. Generations were born and died without ever witnessing a sunrise. The northern oceans froze. Ancient forests grew in ways no one could understand. The roads between cities became narrow corridors through a world almost entirely claimed by darkness. Humanity adapted. Homes were built around fire. New crops were cultivated beneath artificial light. Animals capable of surviving the endless cold were raised. And every child was taught 3 rules before they could even read. Never leave the light. Never answer when the darkness calls your name. And if the fire goes out, do not try to see what is standing outside your door. But then, the sacred fires began to weaken. Slowly at first. A small city in the west lost its flame. No one knew what happened to the people inside. When soldiers arrived 3 months later, the gates were still closed. There were no signs of battle, no bodies, no survivors, only thousands of empty homes. Then another city lost its fire, then another. Every year, another piece of the human world disappeared into darkness. And then, one night, in the city of Vera, the keeper of the flame witnessed something that had not happened in 3 centuries. The sacred fire at the top of the tower flickered, only for a second. But the entire city felt it. Dogs began barking, horses tore against their restraints. Thousands of ravens suddenly abandoned the rooftops. Beyond the northern wall, a deep sound echoed from somewhere in the darkness. It did not sound like an animal. It did not sound human. It sounded as though something enormous had just awakened. The keeper stood motionless, staring toward the forest. He had guarded the flame for 40 years, and for the first time in his life, he was afraid. Not of the darkness, but because he finally understood. The fire was dying. The following morning, though the word morning had long since become nothing more than a measure of time, the city council summoned a man. He was around 30 years old. A long cloak covered in road dust hung from his shoulders. An old sword rested at his side. His body carried the marks of journeys that most citizens of Vera would never dare attempt. His name was Elias. His profession was among the most dangerous that still existed. A fire carrier. Men like Elias crossed the darkness between cities carrying fragments of the sacred fire, sometimes to restore a dying flame, sometimes to save a city, and sometimes only to confirm that there was no one left to save. A metal box was placed before Elias. Inside was a small lantern. The flame within was barely larger than the tip of his finger. Yet the moment the box opened, light filled the room. A councilman looked at Elias. The northern city has less than 30 days. Elias stared at the flame. How far? 17 days, if the old road still exists. Elias said nothing. Everyone understood what those words meant. No one knew whether the old road still existed at all. The councilman pushed the box toward him. Take the flame north. Elias closed the lid. He stood, But before leaving the chamber, he asked one question. What happens if I don't make it in time? No one answered. 3 hours later, the northern gate of Vera opened. Elias stepped outside. Behind him stood the light of the city. Ahead, there was only darkness. An ancient road disappeared into the forest. Against Elias's chest, the lantern containing the sacred fire cast a faint, golden glow. He had walked only a few hundred meters when the city gates closed behind him. Boom. Elias did not turn around. He knew that sound well. It was the sound of knowing that from this moment onward, no one was coming to save you. He continued walking, never knowing that high upon the wall behind him, someone was watching. A tall, thin man, wrapped in a black cloak. None of the guards remembered allowing him onto the wall. No one asked who he was. He simply stood there, watching Elias disappear into the forest. Then, almost too softly to hear, he spoke. Finally, that night, Elias made camp beside the old road. He placed the sacred fire beside him. There was no wind, no birds, no insects, only the forest. Elias closed his eyes. Then, knock. His eyes opened. A sound came from somewhere beyond the trees. Elias placed a hand on the hilt of his sword. Silence. 1 minute passed, then 2. He was about to lie down again. Knock closer this time. Elias stood. He raised the lantern. Golden light spilled across the trees. Nothing. Then, from somewhere deep within the forest, a voice whispered, "Elias." He froze. The voice was faint, but he recognized it immediately, because the person who owned that voice had been dead for 17 years. Elias. Again, from deep within the darkness. Elias stared into the forest and remembered the second rule taught to every child. Never answer when the darkness calls your name. His grip tightened around the lantern. Then the voice came a third time. But this time, it said something else. Something that made Elias forget how to breathe. "My son." It was his mother's voice. "I know where the sun is."